In our previous video, we had covered the repeater operator for shape objects in After Effects. As you probably have figured out by now, these repeaters are something that you only use when you have an actual use for them, meaning they are nice add-ons, but it is something that you need to take into account as you are conceptualizing, as you are starting your ideas and the story that you're trying to tell. You would only find a need for them once you actually have that design in mind. With this in mind, know the important thing from these videos is that from the shape videos, is that you need to keep in mind the order in which you are adding all these different operators onto your shape layer. That's the key, and that is the takeaway from these videos. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick run through all of the rest of the operators, or most of them at least. The most important operators in my opinion, are the repeater and the trim paths operators. So the first one we're going to see right now is the trim paths operator. For this, I'm going to use the same concept that I had used a couple of modules ago, where we used the sketch tool to actually create some kind of sketching animation on the screen. So first and foremost, I'm going to bring in this rocket into this composition. By the way, this composition is 1280 by 720, same settings of what we've been working with. So I'm going to bring in that rocket, which we have used in the past, and I'm going to scale it down to about 40%. Now I'm going to place that rocket over here on the right-hand side of the screen, and I am going to go ahead and use the motion sketch utility. If you don't have it open, go under Window, Motion Sketch, and that's how you open that. Now this allows you to, like I walked you through this a couple of modules ago, but know now that you can actually just go ahead and start animating with this. So I'm going to select the rocket layer. I'm going to click Start Capture. And with my time marker at the beginning, I'm going to go ahead and click and keep on dragging as I click to create an animation of that particular layer on the screen. So if I scrub through this, you'll notice that my rocket is moving across the screen. If I play it back, you'll notice how jerky it is. And that is because it captured my motion of my mouse. So I want to smooth that out. So to do that, I'm going to call the actual position property of the layer, which shows you that you have all of these different keyframes that were created when you were capturing the motion sketch. And now I want to select the actual position label, and I want to open up the Smoother utility, which you also find under Window, Smoother. Now, by default, this should be 1. So I'm going to bring it back to 1. And with all of the keyframes selected, I'm going to click Apply. You notice that in this case, in this instance, it didn't clean up as much as it did when we did this on the previous video, on the motion sketch video. So how do I work this out? How do I make this smoother? Well, let me undo that change really quick. And I'm going to increase the tolerance to about 10. Now, what this is doing is basically saying, let's try to tone down every 10 keyframes. Is going to calculate the change in position and the speed of change in between them, and is going to create one keyframe that sort of tries to trap all that information into that one frame, the frame every 10 frames. So let's go ahead and say, okay, let's click Apply, and you'll notice now that I have a much reduced amount of frames. And if I play this back, the motion is smooth, but the speed is still a little bit jerky. So I need to make these guys rove across time. So I'll right-click one of them, go to Rove Across Time, and there it is. Now they space themselves out so that my motion is linear on the screen. So when I play this back, my motion is not only smooth, but the speed of playback is smooth. Now, if I want to, the way we did it the previous time was, I just undid Control Z. I'm going to click on one of them. I'm going to go to Keyframe Interpolation, or under Keyframe Interpolation, go to Roving. Instead of Lock to Time, I want to say Rove Across Time. Click OK. Same result. So you have linear motion, and the speed of playback is the same across all the tween frames. Now, with that done, what I want to do at this point is I want to steal that motion path. I want to make use of that motion path for a shape object that I want to create. So what I want to do is I want to click on the position label again, and I'm going to copy by going Control C or Command C on the Mac. Control C to copy. And what I want to do at this point is I want to create in that composition, I want to right click, go New, and create a shape layer. So once I create that shape layer, that creates that empty shape layer for me. And I want to go ahead and in that shape layer, I want to add, under Content, I want to add a path. So you notice that we have rectangle, ellipse, polystar, and a path. When I click on a path, it basically creates a placeholder for a path, and a path can be any path. So keep that in mind, because any path means any path from a vector-based program. So I can go ahead and bring in, I can copy a path from Illustrator and paste it into this path over here. Or like I just did, I created some animation and that motion path I copied, and now I'm going to select that path content inside the actual shape layer, and I'm going to select in that path, I'm going to paste it, Control V. Now you'll notice that it pastes the path, but it's kind of offset. It's moved somewhere down here where my ship is moving across the screen this way. It is now down here. And so I want to bring that down. I want to bring that up. So instead of moving the path, what I need to keep in mind is that, remember, this shape object, its center of gravity is right here. That is the 0, 0 point for that shape object. But for the rocket, the 0, 0 point is up here. So that means I need to change the position of that shape layer, the anchor point of that shape layer, to be up here. So let me go to transform and change its position from 640 by 360 to 0 and 0. And you'll notice that it moves that shape layer up there, and the path now is where my ship was animated. So that works. All right, so with that done, I want to go ahead and close the transformation drop down for the contents of that shape layer. And I want to add to the path, I want to add a stroke. So let me go ahead and add a stroke to that. And I want to go ahead and uncollapse that stroke. And I want to make it about, let's say, 10 pixels in width. And so that's perfect right there. Now, what you guys see where this is going. I want to create a path that is being written on by my rocket. So before I continue, I want to go ahead and do a couple of things to the rocket. I want to make sure that my rocket is following my path. So I want to select the rocket layer, go to Layer, Transform, Auto Orient, orient along path so that the rocket is now following the path. And I need to rotate that rocket 90 degrees so that it is actually laying flat on the path. So I'm going to go to its rotation value, change the rotation to 90 degrees, and now the rocket will follow the path, as you guys can see. So with that done, I want to go back, and I'm done with that rocket animation. I want to go to the shape layer, and what I want to do is I don't want to see that path already existing on the screen. I want it to be written on as my rocket moves across the screen. So that's where a new operator comes in. So besides all of the things that we can add in there into the shape layer, I can also, let me collapse the path and the stroke. I want to select the shape layer, and into that shape layer, I want to add a trim paths operator. So now this trim paths operator, all it does, it does a lot of stuff actually. But what it does, the main thing is that it tells me where a path starts and where it ends, and whether I want to offset it or not. So let's take a look at what's happening on the path. Right now, the start point for the path based on that operator is at 0, and the end point is at 100% of the length of the path. If I reduce the length of the path percentage, you'll notice that the path gets shrunk. So I can go ahead and modify, and if you notice to the left, they all can be keyframe, which means you can create this in animation mode. So let's go ahead and bring that endpoint to 0 and start a keyframe at that point. At the 5-second mark, my rocket should be here, which is 100% of the path. So when I do that, I am having my ship ride the path. Now I can go ahead and move the shape below the rocket on the stack, and now it looks like the ship is leaving a trail behind it. Now where this could be cool is if I wanted to create some sort of like fading path. So if I want to do that, I can go ahead and start changing the actual start point as well. So if I click on start to set a keyframe at the 1-second mark, I've determined that value will be 0% at that point. But if at the end point, I can go ahead and do this and offset it separately. So let's go ahead and start at the 0 mark, and I'm going to set keyframes for those two at the same time. Now at this point, I want to make that 100% as well. When that happens, basically as I'm starting, I'm ending, so I won't see a path. However, if I select only the keyframes for start by clicking on the label, notice that both of them get selected, and I offset those by moving them downstream. Now my start points can start fading, offset from the point where it ends. So I get a little line that is being left behind the ship. And now I can go ahead and start working on that path. If I go ahead and say I want to work on the stroke, and I want to say I want this to be not butt cap. Butt cap is basically when you have a straight cut like this over here. I want to change that to rounded cap, so I have a little nice smooth cap. I also want to change tapering on that. So if I change the start point for this one, you'll notice that I can start tapering the shape of my line. So I play with that shape for the tapering, and I like that right there. So let's say it's about, I want to use a round number, so I'll say 60%. So let me go back to the beginning with my time marker at the beginning, collapse that layer really quick, and click over here to deselect everything and do a preview. And now it looks like the rocket has this nice little trail behind it. So that is how you create trimming, the trimming operator on a composition. Another thing that you can work with, some of the other operators include, let me go ahead and create a new composition. I am gonna simply create a path by using this time the tool. Now actually I'm gonna use my pen tool. So let me go ahead and select my pen tool, and notice that since I don't have any layers in my composition, the only thing I can do when I click here and here is create a path. Now that path I can control from here if I want to start increasing the value, because it contains absolutely everything inside. The content is already there, shape, path, and it contains a path, stroke, and fill. It contains absolutely everything from scratch because I did it using the tools as opposed to adding them from here. Now, into that stack, I want to go ahead and add a, let's say, I want to go ahead and add we already saw trim paths. We can offset paths as well. You can do a twist, for example. Let me turn off the fill color for this. And you can go ahead and with that twist operator, you can go ahead and increase this and change the center of it. So you can modify to create kind of like a sine wave if you want to. To remove a path operator, let's say that's not the path operator I want. So I can select the operator itself and delete it, and it goes away. Now I can go ahead and add another path operator like zigzag, for example. And I can go ahead and transform that value for the zigzag by increasing its value and the amount of repeaters. So I have that, and it's all keyframeable, as you can see. I can change corners to smooth, so I can create sort of like a sound wave if you want to, and you can change the amount of curves as you go through time by keyframing. Let me go ahead and remove that zigzag again. If I don't want that, let's go ahead and add another operator such as twist. No, I already did twist, sorry. Let's go ahead and do wiggle paths. And wiggle path is actually pretty cool because it allows you to increase the amount of the size of the wiggle. It also allows you to increase or decrease the amount of detail. And you can change that from corner to smooth. You can change the frequency per second that you can do. So I'm going to keep it at 2 right now, and then I'm going to just play this back by pressing the space bar. And it automatically creates animation for you. That is that wiggle value. If you want that to be a lot more dramatic, go to something like 10, and you'll notice that this gets more dramatic. So this information, basically, this is all part of that particular wiggle operator that is available to you under the add operators for that particular shape object. The important ones for me, the ones that I use constantly when I'm working with shapes, are trim paths and repeater. And you can see why, because they actually are something that I can add on to something else, and they sort of merge better into other workflows as opposed to simply adding something just because it looks great. So I actually make them part of my storytelling utility pack as opposed to just adding stuff to make it look good. There is more of a conscious move as to why I add them within my my workflow. Think of it, for example, if you could have paths that you create in Illustrator for text, and then that you can use trim paths to actually make it look like make it look like you're writing on while you bring them onto onto After Effects. So there is a lot of basically the limit is your imagination as to what you can do with combining all of these different things. Thing to keep in mind once again is that as you're stacking things inside the actual contents of the shape layer, you need to make sure that you create them and place them in order in the stack, so in the order in which your intent in the order in which you intend them to be in order to create the proper results for your video or for your motion graphics project.